The Pope in Egypt. He promotes a message of unity during this historic visit. We have a report from Cairo. The first 100 days, a report card looking at President Trump's highs and lows so far. Government shutdown. Congress passes a spending bill to keep the government open, at least for now. And Catholic peace builders.
I think that the Catholic Church can play a unique role in ensuring that those voices are heard at all times.
A college student's research project on promoting peace reaches Capitol Hill. On EWTN News Nightly for Friday, April 28, 2017. Pope Francis arrives in Egypt for a two-day trip, delivering a message of peace to both Christians and Muslims. Thanks for joining us for News from a Catholic Perspective. I'm Jason Calvi, in for Lauren Ashburn. The Holy Father urges Egypt's leading imams to reject violence in God's name and instead preach tolerance.
Occorre accompagnare e far maturare generazioni che rispondano alla logica.
Pope Francis says to counter violence, we need to stay close to young people, helping them on the path to maturity and goodness. He spoke to Muslims at Al-Azhar University, the seat of learning in Sunni Islam. Pope Francis was also welcomed today at the presidential palace in Egypt. The Holy Father stood at attention with President el-Sisi while a military band played the national anthems of the Vatican and Egypt. Pope Francis is also meeting today with Tawadros II, the spiritual leader of Egypt's Coptic Orthodox Church. We have a correspondent traveling with the Holy Father from Rome across the Mediterranean Sea to Cairo. Edward Penton, Rome correspondent for EWTN's National Catholic Register, joins us from Cairo, where he's traveling with the Holy Father. Ed, the Pope says he's a messenger of peace. How has he been received so far?
Very well, actually, Jason. He got plenty of rounds of applause in his speech earlier this afternoon to the Al-Azhar University, where he gave a long speech calling for peace and really trying to reach out to the Muslims here to try and help lessen the attacks here and trying to reach out to those who are succumb to extremism. And that was very well received, people think.
And this trip comes at a tense moment in Egypt, just weeks after those Palm Sunday church attacks that killed at least 70 people. How are they protecting the Pope today?
There's a lot of security out here. There's plenty of troops and armed guards all along the route from the airport to where he was going this afternoon, and it's quite visible. The usually congested traffic here is even more congested, but there's plenty of security here from all sorts of from the top down. So there's a lot here. The Pope isn't traveling not in an armored car, but he is traveling with a lot of protection, even without that support.
Sure. And Egypt is home to the Middle East's largest Christian community, the Copts. How are Catholic relations with the Coptic Orthodox Church?
They're actually quite good. I mean, the Pope Tawadros, the head of the Coptic Orthodox Church, which is the largest contingent of Christians here in Egypt, has built up quite a good relationship with the Pope. He was one of the first religious leaders to meet Pope Francis after his election in 2013, and they built quite a good relationship ever since then. He's been to Rome already, and this is basically a return visit. He was one of 4 others who've invited the Pope to Egypt for this trip, and they're very keen to build ecumenical relations during these next 2 days.
And religious freedom advocates say that the Pope should speak up for Christians on this trip. Do you expect him to do that?
Very much so, yes. Obviously in a very diplomatic way, but I think he won't hold back from standing up for Christians and defending them from the violent attacks which we've seen recently. There isn't a great deal of persecution in Egypt, not like in Syria or Iraq. There's discrimination, but there are these sporadic attacks which are of great concern. And the Vatican sees Egypt as very important in the Middle East, and that's why the Pope has come here to really reach out to the Muslims here and try to find resolutions and peace to the conflicts and the violence that has been taking place.
We're certainly praying for the Pope's trip, for your safety. Edward Penton, Rome correspondent for EWTN's National Catholic Register, thank you.
Thanks, Jason.
With just hours to spare, the House and Senate approve a short-term spending bill. It keeps the government from shutting down, at least for now. Mark Irons reports tonight from Capitol Hill.
Jason, this bill will keep the government funded for the next week. The deadline to approve a budget for the rest of the fiscal year was due midnight tonight, but Republicans and Democrats couldn't reach a final agreement, so they voted for a delay.
The joint resolution is passed.
House members backed the week-long extension to keep the government running in a 382-30 vote. Pro-life Republican Jim Renacci was one of those 30, voting against the bill to extend the deadline.
I did vote against it because I'm a big believer that we already took 2 weeks off, and now we're just extending for 7 days. I believe we need to get our work done.
The disagreements create a lot of partisan finger-pointing
Pelosi keeps screwing it all up.
as lawmakers decide how to package a $1 trillion budget to finance the government through September 30th.
They have the majority, they have the president, they have the Senate, they have the House. Any shutting down of government, the ball is in their court.
Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi has said the long-term budget plan is filled with poison pills, measures her party can't accept.
Well, Nancy Pelosi has a heck of a lot different perspective on what a poison pill would be versus my view, or probably a lot of my Republican colleagues' view.
If Jesus our Savior came down and wrote the budget package, there would still be people that say there are poison pills in it.
Democrats say one of those pills is the proposed U.S.-Mexico border wall.
I'm not going to vote for a bill that funds a crazy wall.
I am supportive of the wall because the American people want to see the wall, especially people back in my district.
When lawmakers come back to work next week, they'll have to finalize an agreement to fund the government through the end of September. House Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy says representatives won't vote on health care overhaul until at least next week as well. That is something that the White House had hoped would be completed by tomorrow, Trump's 100th day as president. Jason.
All right, thanks a lot, Mark. And President Trump becomes the first sitting president in more than 30 years to address the National Rifle Association's annual convention.
I want to thank each and every one of you, not only for your help electing true friends of the Second Amendment, but for everything you do to defend our flag and our freedom.
The president traveled to Atlanta to join the gun rights meeting. The NRA strongly supported him during the presidential campaign. President Trump signs an executive order which could open up expanded oil and gas drilling in the Arctic and other federal areas. The order directs Interior Secretary Ryan Zinke to review the current 5-year plan for offshore oil and gas exploration. This is another step in the reversal of Obama-era policies. And the president marks 100 days in office tomorrow. He has rattled Washington, but pleased many in his base. Tonight, we take a look at the time in office as this key benchmark arrives.
In the first 100 days, we've taken historic action to eliminate wasteful regulations. They're being eliminated like nobody's ever seen before. There's never been anything like it.
Trump campaigned on a promise of instant disruption and has set a furious pace of action, but he's had some major setbacks, including a failed attempt to replace Obamacare and personnel issues. Democrats blast him for failing to make progress.
This president has either broken or failed to fulfill many of the promises he made to working families during the campaign.
His first 100 days is a list of promises made, promises broken.
But the president has won worldwide praise for a military strike on Syria after a gruesome chemical attack left dozens dead. Another Trump feat,
so help me God,
confirming Supreme Court Justice Neil Gorsuch. But pro-life advocates say his biggest accomplishment is on the life issue.
This White House was the first to be represented at the March for Life. And then there were subsequent day after day pro-life games. The Mexico City policy, the defunding of international promotion of abortion, the rescinding of the Obama order that said that states couldn't defund Planned Parenthood in the Title X programs. I would say there's no question that this is a president who was governing as a pro-life president.
And many in the pro-life movement are confident there will be more progress to come. President Trump will celebrate 100 days in office with an America First rally in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania tomorrow evening. President Trump appoints the former president of the pro-life group Americans United for Life to a senior position in the Department of Health and Human Services. Charmaine Yost, a frequent guest here on EWTN News Nightly, will serve as Assistant Secretary of Public Affairs at HHS. Yost began her career serving under Ronald Reagan and was an advisor to former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee's 2008 presidential campaign. On Twitter, Speaker Paul Ryan congratulates Yost, writing, "Yet again, this administration demonstrates strong commitment to the pro-life cause." The last member of President Trump's cabinet is sworn in on day 99 of the Trump administration.
So help me God. So help me God.
Vice President Mike Pence swore in Alexander Acosta as the 27th Secretary of Labor today. He was the Dean of Florida International University College of Law, and before that, a federal prosecutor under former President George W. Bush. President Trump picked Acosta after his first choice business executive Andrew Pudzer dropped out. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson makes plans to cut 2,300 jobs at the State Department. That's about 3% of the workforce. The proposal shrinks the number of new diplomats being hired. Secretary Tillerson told NPR he's reorganizing the department to make it more efficient and focused. The United States calls for new sanctions on North Korea. Secretary Tillerson chaired a special meeting of the UN Security Council. He warned diplomats now is the time to stop the threat.
Failing to act now on the most pressing security issue in the world may bring catastrophic consequences. We have said this before and it bears repeating. The policy of strategic patience is over.
Tillerson also urged tougher action from China, North Korea's main trading partner. Tillerson's speech comes as North Korea flexes its military might in drills. North Korea's leader Kim Jong-un supervised them earlier this week to mark the 85th anniversary of the Korean Army. The Taliban in Afghanistan announced the beginning of their spring offensive. They promised to build their political base and focus on military assaults. The Afghan government admits it only controlled 52% of Afghanistan's districts last year. That's down from 63% the year before. Coming up, Catholic bishops speak out about a series of executions in Arkansas. And we're following religious persecution and suffering in Sudan.
If you're a Muslim and you convert to Christianity, you're in trouble.
E quindi chiamato anche oggi a salvare.
Pope Francis draws applause in Egypt on the first day of his two-day trip. He calls the country the cradle of Christianity, Islam, and Judaism, and says it's been handed the heavy task of bringing peace back to the Middle East. Thanks for joining us. I'm Jason Calvi, in for Lauren Ashburn. A civil rights group calls for an investigation into Arkansas's rush to execute death row inmates following another execution last night. Kenneth Williams shook violently before he became the fourth inmate in 8 days to die by lethal injection. A spokesman for Arkansas's governor says the movements were an involuntary muscular reaction. The state attempted to execute 8 inmates before a lethal injection sedative expires at the end of this month. 4 other inmates were spared by court orders. The U.S. Bishops' Conference pleaded for mercy, asking the governor to stop the executions. And before leaving office, President Obama began easing sanctions against Sudan, imposed in 1988 to force the government to stop killing its own people. This week, activists are urging Congress to enforce the sanctions. Lauren Ashburn talked to one of those activists.
David Detoni, Director of Operations for the Sudan Relief Fund, was one of the people testifying. He joins us now. Welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
What did you say to lawmakers about the situation in Sudan?
Well, I said the situation in Sudan has been allowed to continue for way too long. And we need to hold the government of Sudan accountable for their acts of terrorism that they've committed against the United States.
Against the United States. Explain what those are.
Well, they hosted Osama bin Laden in the 90s. 2 of our embassies were blown up after bin Laden had been in Khartoum for over 6 years. They've hosted other terrorist organizations. Now, the Obama administration said that Sudan's cooperation had gotten better with America.
And they lifted the sanctions.
And they proposed to lift some sanctions. I just said I think that's an unforgivable sin. And I think that we should hold them accountable.
Give me an example of how the approximately 3% of Christians are being treated in Sudan. It's 97% Muslim.
Yes. If you're in Khartoum, where a lot of Christians are, you're a second-class citizen. Your church can be taken away from you. There's a land dispute. The government will just subtly allow it to happen. This recently just happened, and a man was killed, and the government really did nothing. If you're a Muslim and you convert to Christianity, you're in trouble. You could be killed. If you're in the Nuba Mountains, where there are more Christians, 30, 40, 50% of the population are Christian.
Just in the mountains?
In the Nuba Mountains. Well, there's been a civil war there that General Bashir declared on them.
25 years ago, was that?
It's happened off and on for 30 or 40 years. And there was supposed to be a political resolution 6 years ago. And Khartoum just decided no. And so they've been bombing innocent women and children. Schools, hospitals have foxholes next to them where the kids can just jump into the foxholes because a bomb comes and you don't even hear it. And the shrapnel spins, boom, you're dead.
And you were there and you saw the shrapnel.
Absolutely. I have some. I picked it up just to keep it. I wanted to show lawmakers yesterday, but I was a little concerned about them not letting me in with it. So
with some shrapnel in your hand through the X-ray machine.
That's right.
That was probably a good call.
Yeah.
Let's talk about South Sudan very quickly. There was a bloody civil war. You have Sudan, South Sudan. What's happening with Christians there?
Well, it's mostly Christians in South Sudan. Unfortunately, it's a power struggle. It's a resource struggle because there are a lot of resources in South Sudan. And the situation's just disintegrating into chaos.
Tribal, very tribal among Christians.
Very tribal. Yeah, very much tribal and horrific. So the Obama administration just didn't quite do enough, and we're not in front of this enough. So President Trump is inheriting a potential human catastrophe on a massive scale.
And with famine too, right?
Famine and over 1 million refugees, 2 million in the region, and so it's very unstable for the region. And so we need, and I'm asking the Trump administration to get out in front of this so that on their watch, we don't see a genocide, we don't see massive starvation.
Okay, thank you so much. David Detoni, Director of Operations for the Sudan Relief Fund. You testified in front of the House Africa Committee. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
The Deputy White House Press Secretary tells EWTN President Trump is committed to a new health care plan.
Repealing and replacing Obamacare is one of his top priorities. That's something that he and his administration and the team are working on constantly, day in, day out, and we hope to see that get finished and completed here in the coming weeks.
Sarah Huckabee Sanders also reacts to the head of the DNC saying Democrats must support abortion. You can see more of Catherine Zeltner's interview with her tonight on EWTN Pro-Life Weekly at 11 Eastern. It re-airs Sunday morning at 10 Eastern. Up next, a college senior looks at Catholic peace builders in Nigeria and El Salvador.
I think the Catholics have a unique role to play in this.
We never give more honor to Jesus than when we honor his mother. A quote from St. Louis de Montfort on his feast day. The French priest is known for his book True Devotion to Mary, which also inspired St. John Paul II. Thanks for watching EWTN News Nightly. I'm Jason Calvi, in for Lauren Ashburn. World leaders struggle to bring peace in the midst of conflict. But earlier this week, one Catholic college student went to Capitol Hill to share research on Catholic peace builders in Nigeria and El Salvador. Lauren Ashburn spoke to her.
Mary Grace Donahoe, a senior at Stonehill College in Massachusetts, joins us now. Thanks for joining us.
Of course, thank you.
Your research focused on local Catholic peace builders in Nigeria and El Salvador. And here's your conclusion from your report. It is essential for peace builders to ensure that their efforts incorporate marginalized voices and are sustainable beyond one person or organization. What do you mean by marginalized voices?
I mean marginalized people that are engaging in interreligious dialogue throughout Nigeria. So my analysis throughout Nigeria is that there are several organizations that are doing a lot of prominent work and a lot of people at the local level who often get marginalized because of their lack of access to resources or types of power. So I think that the Catholic Church can play a unique role in ensuring that those voices are heard at all times.
Now, the Catholic Church has been a peace builder for centuries. And as a college student, why did you decide to focus your research on peace building and on the Catholic Church?
Well, I personally in my own life, I'm very interested in the discipline of Catholic peace building. And for my research, I kind of looked at the way that people embody what I call unity and diversity. And I chose the Catholic Church for this specifically because of the Catholic understanding of God as both monotheistic and triune simultaneously, which I believe is kind of an embodiment of what it means to be unified in the diverse. So I think the Catholics have a unique role to play in this.
But you are also at a Catholic school.
I am,
Stonehill
yes.
is Catholic.
Yes,
and
it is.
You didn't receive a grant for this, but tell us about what you're doing here with Congress.
So I am with the Council for Undergraduate Research, and I am presenting my research at Posters on the Hill, and to kind of raise awareness about the alternative methods to eliminating violence, and particularly through Catholic
What's
peace building.
Posters on the Hill?
Posters on the Hill is a conference sponsored by, again, the Council for Undergraduate Research, and it attracts undergraduate researchers from all over the 50 states to come and meet with their congresspeople and tell them about the importance of undergraduate research, but also about their specific projects.
And so what would you like lawmakers to take away from your project and do?
I think the most important piece is that there are alternatives to using violence to combat violence, and I think we've seen throughout the changing nature of conflict in the world today that we need different solutions. We need solutions that don't always try the same thing and always fail, and I really think that peace building can kind of be that new solution if it's taken seriously.
Well, what I want to do is commend you for spending your senior year in college actually doing some substantive research that is not only helping peace, but helping the Catholic Church. What did you learn that is going to change the choices you make in your life?
I think that the battle, I guess, to promote peace is a difficult one, and I'm finding that very much looking for work post-graduation, looking into different graduate school programs, and I think that there's a need for people more generally to kind of take this more seriously, that this has proven results, and very often it's more successful than other types of violence.
Than violence on violence.
Yes,
Mary
absolutely.
Grace Donahoe, senior at Stonehill College in Massachusetts. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And let us all tonight pray for peace. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Jason Calvi. Thanks for watching. We leave you tonight with a look at some of the people who make this newscast possible. Good night and God bless.